Hi y'all, Phil here with High Tech Legion. Your computer's case can be either one of the least important components or it can be one of the most important. If you're doing a budget build, it doesn't really matter that much. If a friend asks for help picking out a case and it's a budget build, I'll usually just point them to a list of what's compatible and tell them to pick something aesthetically pleasing. Other than that, if you need a lot of cooling, such as having multiple video cards, high-end processor overclocking, water cooling, or lots of storage space, things start getting a little more hairy, and you really have to you have to blend both aesthetics with functionality, and that's where things start to break down and get expensive. So behind me is Fractal Designs Arc XL. This is the big brother to their Arc MIDI line, and it offers some extra features compared to the MIDI. Most notably, it has two extra 5 1/4 inch drives, and it has a few inches taller, which gives a lot more space for airflow and extra cooling options. The front of the Arc XL is very similar to that of the Arc MIDI. It's just a very clean interface. You have your grill down here for your two fans, and you have your 4 drive bays here. The fan cover here comes off, just push in the top and the clips will release. So you can see your fans, easy access to your fans. And again, just snap it back into place. If we take this off, there's a little handle down here. Make it easy. You can see it's just held on with these little clip things that just go in and they pop out in and out pretty easy. Again, space for your drives. Your included single 140mm fan here, space for another, and you also probably can't see it on the camera, but there are 2 screws here which hold the bottom hard drive cage in place. This way you can remove the bottom hard drive cage to replace it with something like a water pump or to whatever you might want to put there. And putting it back on is, again, as easy as line up the holes and snap it back together. The top panel of the Arc XL, you can see in the front here we have our fan speed adjuster, our audio ports, the mic in, headphones out, the power switch reset, 2 USB 3.0 ports and 2 USB 2.0 ports. Underneath this grill, which can be removed by 2 thumb screws in the back, we have lots of fan mounting options. And the fans mount from the inside of the case, so now you can see here we have a lot of dust filtering, which is great. Unfortunately, just like the other front panel dust filter, this is locked in place. You can't readily take it out. And if you look carefully here, we can see lots of space for mounting fans. You do a 140 or a 120 up here, independent of these. You can do various sizes, 80 millimeters down here, 120, 140. You can even do up to a single 200 millimeter fan for instead of having 2 smaller fans. This is also designed to readily accept up to a 360 millimeter radiator, a thin 360 millimeter radiator. You can also do that limitation is there because of the drive bays underneath. You can do up to a thick 240 millimeter radiator if you just use these 2 here. On the Arc XL's side, you can see we have a nice large window for looking inside the case. It also comes shipped with a plastic film over it to prevent any scratches during shipping. Take it off, there's just 2 more thumb screws on the side here. Swings open and then pops off. Over on the right, you can see we have our hard drive cages, and we have our little box of goodies with all the screws and a couple zip ties that you need for mounting everything inside. That includes some thumb screws that hold the hard drive trays in place over here on the side of your cage. The way these work, as you can see, you have these rubber grommets. We have 4 slots on each side, so you can put your hard drive in one of 2 positions, depending on if you want it, which way you want it facing. Inside, whether you want the ports to the front or the back of the case. Then you can also remove this hard drive cage by taking out these 2 thumb screws. This top one is not readily accessible with just thumbs. And you can see here we just slide it out. You have your little feet here that go into these tracks on the top and bottom. And this guy can be put back in, just like this. This allows more airflow to go through to, say, your video cards or the rest of your case. The bottom one cannot be readily rearranged like this. It has 6 screws, 4 on the bottom and 2 on the front, which go to the main front area with a fan behind the front bezel. So you can take them out, you just can't rearrange them quite as easily as the top 4. If you need a large video cards, have your hard drives down here with your air blowing this way, and with the SSDs on the back panel, you can still have 4 large capacity drives up here with your main operating system drives back here on the back panel. Up here are the 5¼ inch drive bays. Again, they just screw in like regular drives. Here we have another 140mm fan and our 8 expansion. The backside of the case, as you can see, is pretty standard. There's nothing really fancy going on here. It's held in by these 2 thumb screws. And thankfully, unlike previous designs, this one kind of hinges off instead of being the slide and latch in place type. And you can see the cables for the front panel are already routed down here. We have 2 mounting points for solid state drives. We have lots of rubber grommets for cabling. And we have our power cable over here for the built-in fan speed controller. Here's our cable for the front fan, and here's our hard drive cage. On the back side of the Arc XL, you can see here we have another one of the 140mm fans. You can see we have the 8 expansion slots and the power supply mounting point. And if you look carefully, you'll notice that we have several spots all in lanes so that you can put the power supply in either upside down or normal in either configuration. Here we can see more venting and more venting. The I/O panel here. On the original Arc Mini design, there were 2 holes here for water cooling tubing. They have just been replaced with a mesh now. And they also got rid of the fan speed controller slot on the back here because it's now on the front of the case. On the base of the Arc XL, you can see we have some nice case feet, nice and tall, with lots of airflow. Also look to be pretty solid. And you can see here, this is a little grip to help remove the front panel. And we also have a removable mesh here. This guy's really easy to clean. You can see the mounting points for another fan underneath here, and lots of airflow for the power supply. There's a little, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but there are little teeth right here on the filter so that it won't accidentally pop out. They latch in right here. This way the filter won't accidentally latch out. When you want to remove the filter or put it in, you have to actually pull this outward and then slide. You can also see here 4 screws. These hold in the lower hard drive tray, or lower hard drive rack. So if you take these out, you can remove the lower rack. Alright, now here we can see all the fasteners that come with the Fractal XL, Arc XL. We have our power supply screws, motherboard offsets, solid state drive screws, motherboard screws, thumb screws for securing optical drives, hard drive tray screws. These hold the hard drive trays in place. fan screws, namely these are for use with the front fans. And we have 32 more. These are for actual hard drives and zip ties. Now, these 32 screws and these 32 screws are meant to be used with these white hard drive trays. Also, in here with the motherboard offsets, we have a neat little tool which is designed specifically for securing your motherboard offsets. So you have a hexagonal inset here, which grabs on perfectly to the, actually, sorry, it's a 12-point socket, essentially, which grabs onto the motherboard offsets. Now on the other side you have, you can use either a flathead or Phillips head screwdriver to secure your motherboard offsets. Installing the power supply, you can see we have these little rubber feet here for the power supply to stand on. There's also a lining of soft foam right here to eliminate any kind of vibrations that might be caused by the power supply. You do have to be a little careful with these feet as they are only held in by glue, so if you play too roughly with them you might accidentally dislodge them. So all you do is just put the power supply there. These feet are nice where you can just let it sit there while you get your screws in place. There we go. And snugs up right up to the foam. Replace, put on the rest of the screws nice and secure, and power supply is done. If you look over here, you can see I can stick my fingers all the way underneath the power supply. It's going to be great for lots of airflow on the power supply. Hard drive installation is fairly straightforward. You have your grommets here, which you just need to line up with the 4 screw holes on the bottom of your hard drive. The grommets can be moved around depending on where you need to, so you can adjust the length of the hard drive so it sticks out more towards the back or the front. The screws are kind of unique in that they have a very flat, shallow head. There's a shoulder, and then you get to the threads. This is designed so that the grommet is always on the shoulder. And the process is really quite simple. You just line the grommets up with the holes, put the screw in, start the threads, and then screw it in the rest of the way. And you just slide it into the notch until it clicks. And you're done. The white trays can also be used on a solid state drive. Just need to make sure you orient the plugs the right way you want them. And then on the bottom of the drive you have 4 spots for screwing in a solid state drive. So just line up the holes and screw it in. Once you finish with all 4 screws, just go ahead and slide it into the tray and lock it in place with one of the hard drive tray screws. Now, it's not really necessary for an SSD, but for a standard hard drive, it helps keep it from any kind of vibrations. Solid state drive installation is also accomplished through the back behind the motherboard panel. There's lots of space on the case itself, so you can see there's this SSD panel here and an SSD panel down here. You can unscrew them to make accessing the screw holes on this a lot easier. It's then a simple process to take your SSD brick here, put your drive into the bracket, line up the holes, and put 4 screws in. Once you have all 4 screws done, you just put it back up against the motherboard panel and put the other two screws back in place. Motherboard installation is also a fairly simple process, but first up you need to make sure you install your motherboard offsets. Any ATX motherboard happens to use 9, but Fractal includes 11, so just put it in there. And there's this little nut socket for tightening up the offsets. You don't want to super tighten them, just make sure they're not. Once the motherboard offsets are all in place, just line up your motherboard and place it in. Of course, the I/O panel is already in place up here. That is lined up. There we go. Okay. There we go. And now start adding your screws. So this board has 9 of them. Again, just make them snug. Put all 9 in before you snug them up, and be sure you do not over tighten, otherwise you might end up stripping offsets or even the motherboard tray. Well, the motherboard installed, I can also show you one of the main features of this case, which is the space up here for built-in water cooling. I have here a 360mm radiator, which easily fits in up here to match up with the 120mm fan. And look on the back. Yep, everything lines up perfectly for the pre-existing screw positions for the 120mm fan mounting points. The only thing is you will have to give up one of your top CD drives. You will have to give up your top CD drive bay. But even down here, there's still lots of clearance where you can add, if for some reason you're water cooling just your video card, or just whatever reason you're not water cooling your CPU. See, there's still lots of room here for any size memory, and pretty much any size of aftermarket heatsink. As you can see, there's lots of space, even when you're dealing with some of the larger air cooling heatsinks. See, this guy is usually a real pain to get on with standard mid-tower, but see here, it's really not much of an issue with this particular with the Arc XL. As normally this one right here on the bottom would take about 5 minutes just to get to, and I'm done in a matter of seconds. There's also lots of space for video card installation. Just a quick estimate, this is a 10.5-inch card, and you can see there's still space over here. So, first things first, remove your brackets. And line up your video card with your PCI Express slot, like so. Okay, make sure that clicks and it's solid, and just screw these back into place real quick. So now you can see there's lots of room, and if we measure this, we can come out to, even with the hard drive cage turned this way, we still have about 1 3/4 inches. And if we turn the hard drive cage around, you can see that we gain a solid almost with that end space, we gain about a little over 2.5 inches of extra space. You can put almost a 13-inch card inside this case. And if you have an even longer card, you can take the hard drive out completely And then you can fit basically anything that happens to be on the market. At that point, you have nearly 8 extra inches to deal with. As you can see, we have quite a rat's nest to deal with just 2 hard drives, well, 3 hard drives, an optical disc, 3 fans, and power for everything. We have quite a rat's nest here. But thankfully, the Arc XL gives us some tools to deal with it, such as these points here, another point up here and here, for using zip ties or twist ties to help with routing your cable, especially this. You certainly don't want to leave it here. When the case is on, it's going to be pushed up against a very hot part of the right behind the processor, but we can easily maneuver it out of the way so that it won't get too warm. After a few minutes, using the various mounting points inside the back of the motherboard tray, the cables have now been arranged and flattened out nicely. The hard drive, the little loops that stop the hard drive trays from sliding further, also the loops stick out far enough to even get a zip tie on to mount more extra cables over here without interfering with the hard drive tray or hard drives. Everything now is nice and flat to the point where I can easily lay on the rear back panel and it'll stay nice and flat. There you go. It's nice and flush. Based on past experience with Fractal Designs Arc series of cases, there was really no reason to expect the Arc XL to be anything less than excellent. For build quality, it's a very sturdy case. In fact, even if you take out both hard drive cages completely, there's no appreciable loss in case rigidity and strength. There's also a lot of space inside so that installing everything is nice and easy process. The hard drive trays are very easy to work with and just slide in place. And I also like the fact that the optical drive bay doesn't have any kind of no screw tool kind of thing which usually doesn't work very well. It's just simple, use thumb screws, hold it in place, nice and simple solution. There's a lot of space inside, as I said, particularly for cooling. On the top side of the case, there's so much space that even if you have a monstrous CPU cooler, air cooler, you're not going to have to worry about struggling to get it in place. This is probably the first case I've dealt with using this particular air cooler that I didn't wind up nicking my fingers or getting cuts from the fins. And on the front, you can also remove the top cage in order to relocate the bottom hard drive cage so that you can add more fans or just go straight for water cooling on the front. So the case overall does a very, very good job. There's nothing about this case that I can really negate it on. The only one thing that I might would be the fact that the feet that help hold up the power supply are only glued in place. But I can't subtract anything on the score for this case because of that, because if you were to secure them in any other way, such as going through the bottom of the case, you'd wind up interfering with the dust filter on the bottom of the case, so glue is probably the only option. And it's really nice that those feet are there in the first place, because that means even if you're working on carpet, you don't have to worry about losing airflow to your power supply. So the case is very good job, very excellent performance. You see in the benchmarks, kept everything well within operating temperatures. Noise-wise, is also very nicely quiet. The fans are large, so they don't have to move too fast, but you do get a lot of airflow. In fact, when turning the speed on the fan controller all the way to high, there was no noticeable gain in the noise from the fans. And in fact, under load, turning those fans up resulted in less noise because the video card actually started ran cooler and didn't have to run its own fans up quite as high. So because of all that stuff, because of how easy it is to build with this case, because of how well it kept stuff nice and cool, I'm just going to have to give it our Editor's Choice Award. Guys, thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Phil with High Tech Legion. Be sure to catch all our other reviews on www.hightechlegion.com. Also, catch us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and say hello in our forums again on our website. Guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.